Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're back in paper for an interesting CEDH game. And what makes it so interesting, you ask? Well, if you haven't read the title, this is mainly a CEDH game. However, one player decided to bring Group Hug to the table, and it definitely had an interesting effect on the game. Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board. Hey, before I start, I wanted to give a shout out to the Weekly Wanderer. They are a weekly newsletter about all things MTG. They do artist spotlights, unusual combos, and even a weekly giveaway. And if you're interested in reading it, I will have the sign up link in the description down below. And best of all, it's free. The deck in question is Teddy's Kyranos and Tira of Meletis deck. This is a group hug deck that uses effective group hug cards to ramp and accelerate the table. Next is a new commander from Commander Legends, Obeka, Brute Chronologist. This is a Kiki combo list that runs several combos revolving around the fact that Obeka can end people's turn. It's amazing how many people love casting spells on other players' turns. Third up is Vizier. He brought Breya and her companion, Zerda. This Artifacts Matter combo deck mains to produce infinite mana through Zerda and Basalt Monolith, and a variety of other combos. And lastly, we have a new pairing of partners. Lutz has brought his Tymna Malcolm Artifact Stack deck. His goal is to lock down the board and whittle his opponents down while gaining advantage from his commanders connecting. But without further ado, let's get to the gameplay. Teddy starts the game off with an exotic orchard and passes. Steve plays a tapped Sunken Hollow and passes. Vizier plays a Sea of Clouds and casts a turn 1 Soul Ring. Lutz plays a command tower and then a Crow Mox, imprinting a phantasmal image, and uses it to cast an Azorius Signet. Teddy plays the forest and passes. Steve plays a Badlands into a Sundial of the Infinite, passing after that. Vizier plays a Shivan Reef and casts a Fabricate to grab Basalt Monolith. Lutz plays an island and then casts a Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. Teddy plays a Plane and then casts a Temple Bell. He immediately taps it to have everyone draw a card. Steve plays a Luxury Suite and passes. On Vizier's upkeep, Steve flashes in a Deceiver Exarch to tap down Vizier's Soul Ring. On his main phase, he casts a Fellwar Stone and passes. Lutz plays Shizo, Death Storehouse as land for turn, and then casts his commander, Tymna the Weaver. Lutz heads to combat swinging Lavinia at Vaz, who takes it, and then Lutz pays 1 life to draw a card. Teddy starts off by drawing from the Temple Bell and then plays a forest as land. He follows it up with a Rites of Flourishing and passes. Steve draws an extra card and plays an Underground Sea and an island as his lands for turn. He then casts a Whip of Erebos. Vizier plays an Academy Ruin and then casts his Basalt Monolith and chooses to do nothing else. Lutz plays a Drowned Catacombs and a Sea of Clouds. He then casts his other commander, Malcolm, Keen Eye Navigator. He follows it up with a Rule of Law, every commander's favorite card. He heads to combat and sends Lavinia at Teddy and Tymna at Vizier. During his second main phase, he pays 2 life to draw 2 cards and passes after that. Teddy plays 2 forests as land for turn. He then draws off the Temple Bell and then casts a Collective Voyage. It resolves and Teddy puts 5 mana while no one else pays. 7 searches out 5 basics to the battlefield. And at this point, we realize that Lutz only plays 1 basic land in the deck. Having cast his 1 spell per turn, Teddy passes after that. Steve plays a Dragon Skull Summit as land, and his second land, he plays a Lotus Field. With the sacrifice trigger on the stack, he flashes in a Hull Breacher and then sacrifices 2 untapped lands and passes. At his end step, Vizier casts a Dispatch to try and remove the Hull Breacher, forgetting about Steve's Sundial, which he uses to end his turn and counter the Dispatch. Vizier only draws 1 while Steve gets a treasure from the Hull Breacher, and on his main phase, Baz plays a Great Furnace and then casts his commander Breya, Ethereum Sculptor, who enters and makes 2 Thopter tokens. Lutz plays a Plains and an untapped Godless Shrine. He heads to combat and swings Malcolm at Steve and Lavinia at Teddy. During his second main phase, Lutz pays 2 life to draw 0 cards and gains Steve 2 treasures. He follows it up with a Knowledge Pool, to which Vaz responds by sacrificing 2 artifacts to kill Lavinia. The Knowledge Pool resolves and everyone exiles the top 3 of their library. On Teddy's turn, we realize that the rule of law actually prevents anyone from casting spells, including Lutz himself. Teddy plays a forest and then a tapped Rupture Spire, paying 1 and passes after that. On Steve's turn, he explains that since he can't cast spells, he needs to discard creatures to hand size so he can reanimate it with a whip to attack Rick and take him out of the game. Teddy helps out by tapping his Temple Bell and letting Steve draw an extra card. Steve goes to discards and discards 2 creatures and passes. Vizier plays a Cascade bluff, and at this point, Lutz agrees to concede and let the other players play.
Oh, that was a heavy lock.
Yeah.
He locked himself out as well.
Yeah, it was so heavy he locked himself out. Vaz then pays 2 to add Zerda, the Dawnwalker, to his hand and cast it. With Zerda on the stack, Steve casts a Glorious End to end Vaz's turn. Teddy plays a Mountain and then casts an Awakening, a Fecundity, and then a Beast Within on Steve's Hull Breacher. Steve responds by flashing in his Dualcaster Mage, copying the Beast Within, and targeting Breya. Vaz then responds with a Muddle the Mixture to counter Steve's Beast Within. After the dust settles, Steve's Hull Breacher dies, he gains a 3/3 Beast and then draws off Fecundity. Teddy follows this up by tapping the Temple Bell to now have the entire table draw a card. He then finishes it up with a Windfall. Steve responds to the Windfall by casting an Opposition Agent. The Windfall resolves, and then Teddy plays a Forbidden Orchard, tapping it for mana and giving the Spirit to Vizier. Steve starts his turn by casting a 1,000-Year Elixir, then an Essor, Wardwing Familiar. He then activates his whip to bring his Hull Breacher back. After, he heads to combat, swinging his board at Teddy, gaining himself 12 life in the process. At his end step, with the whip trigger on the stack, he activates the Sundial to end his turn, and Vizier responds by casting a Limb Duel's Volt. Still being his turn, Steve responds with a Discontinuity to end the turn. Vizier casts a Talisman of Hierarchy and follows it up with an Azorius Signet, and then plays a Sunken Rune as land for turn. After he casts an Astronaut's Altar, and not having good attacks, he passes after that. Teddy plays a Gearpool Orrery and plays an island, a plains, and a forest as lands, and then a Fevered Vision, and finally a Phyrexian Metamorph, copying his Orrery. At his end step, Steve gets another treasure from the Hull Breacher, and Teddy is done after that. Steve plays a Cabal Coffers, a Rakdos Carnarium, bouncing his Badlands, and then replays the Badlands. He follows it up with a Massacre Worm, and with the ETB on the stack, Vizier sacrifices 2 artifacts to Breya to kill Hull Breacher. And after, Teddy taps his Temple Bell, and Steve draws off Fecundity. After all of that, Steve casts a Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, and in response, Vaz sacks 2 more artifacts to kill the Deceiver Exarch. Steve then follows it up by whipping the Deceiver back to the field, and in response again, Vaz sacks Breya and an artifact to kill the Kiki. And in response, Steve makes another Massacre Worm with the Kiki. Steve plays a Command Tower and realizes he needs to untap a permanent, with the Deceiver coming back. He untaps Lotus Veil, not realizing he could have untapped the Whip to bring Kiki back again. He moves to combat and swings the board at Vizier for 22. During his second main, he casts a Final Fortune. With no one having a counterspell, they give the game to Steve since he can reanimate Kiki on his extra turn. Game review. This was a solid game minus the lockdown. This was the first time Lutz had played the deck and hadn't realized he locked himself out of the game as well. Regardless of him conceding, Steve was in a very good position even with the lock in place, since the Whip of Erebos allowed him to reanimate. Vizier might have been a little too hasty though with trying to assemble his combo, and probably should have waited for a little more protection on his end. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay, and if you did, leave a like and consider subscribing, as it really helps us keep making videos. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.